welcome everybody to Measuring Impact Gen AI Code, a LinearB workshop. We are really excited to have everyone here. Just as an again announcing, we are recording this. This recording will be shared out to everybody who is in attendance today, who is registered for the webinar. It will be shared out with the report that we will be reviewing today. Please feel free to use the chat. There's lots of LinearB research members in the chat waiting to answer your questions, to have a discussion with you about what we're doing, how we can do it better, all that kind of stuff. My name is Necco Ceresani. I'm a part of the GenAI research team at LinearB. I am joined by our two guest hosts today, Yishai Beeri, CTO at LinearB. Thanks for coming here today, Yishai.
Great being here. Thanks everyone for joining.
Yeah, and we're also sharing the panel with our very special guest, Birgitta Boeckeler. She is the global lead at the AI-assisted software delivery at Thoughtworks. Birgitta, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, hi everybody, and thanks for the invitation. Looking forward to the discussion.
Wonderful. Well, as we kick off, our agenda is very simple today. We are going to walk through the methodology of how to measure the impact of generative AI code. That will be very quick. And then we're going to get into the 5 insights from the report itself. We had over 100 survey dev leaders from many different continents, and we'll be talking about adoption and risks and benefits. And then finally, like with any other engineering presentation, we will be doing an actual demo of how teams are measuring generative AI code impact today. So that's going to be our very simple agenda. And we're going to keep it, talk a lot about our insights, and that'll be the most of it today. So let's get on into it with our, talk about quickly our report. The Measuring Impact Gen AI Code report, that is the title. I don't know why that's there. But this report had 150 respondents, survey respondents, like I said, from 20 different countries. We are talking about 5 key insights today. The report will be emailed to you directly after this webinar, along with the recording as we get it. It will be having a much deeper dive into methodology than we have, it will even do inside of this workshop today. It will go over the key insights that we talked about in more detail. There will be a list of the metrics that matter for generative AI code impact measurements, and also a tutorial walkthrough of how to begin measuring today, which you can do free with LinearB itself. So we are going to show you how to do that as well. So let's jump right into the Gen AI impact code methodology. Yishai, I'm going to give you the floor to kind of walk us through some of these proxy metrics and what we're looking at.
Thanks, Necco. So, at LinearB, we're all about understanding the processes, the pitfalls, the challenges for dev orgs. Measuring initiatives or changes that happen in dev org is something we've been doing for a long while. And Gen AI, this new revolution, is definitely something that is a huge change in how teams work. And when we talk with our customers, they're looking at, okay, how do I run an initiative of applying this technology, of adopting it, and how do I measure? How do I understand impact? And we found that this question is very important to them. So our way to talk about measuring impact of anything, any change, any initiative, and in particular, Gen AI, runs through 3 pillars. First, you want to understand adoption. If you're rolling out a tool like Copilot or others, you want to understand, is this something that only 10% of my developers are using? Is it spread out across the org? Is it only in specific areas, teams, parts of the code base, and so on? So understanding adoption and how this tool is being used is the first pillar. And an example of a metric or a way to measure that is to look at the PRs that are merged. And if I can count the PRs that are assisted by Gen AI, that were written by Copilot or similar, to the rest, or the total number of PRs, I get a quick understanding of adoption. And then I can slice and dice that by specific teams or repos or services and get the full picture of adoption. The second pillar is about understanding the benefits, right? I'm running an initiative, I'm expecting some change. I want to probably gain something. And if I'm looking at adopting Gen AI tools, this is about getting some benefits, right? Can it help me move faster? So let's measure those benefits. Anything you do should incarnate in changes in metrics that you're tracking. Coding time is an example of a metric that lets me understand whether it takes my developers less time to write up the content of a pull request or a change that they're making to the code base. Does GenAI help them move faster in that regard? So benefits, I want to measure how it's helping me and eventually understand ROI. And finally, we also want to keep tabs on the risks. When we make changes, and this again, GenAI is a good example, comes with a lot of risks, but also other changes, maybe a reorg in my dev teams or introducing some other technology. Everything that changes the way we work carries some risk around the process. Maybe it is introducing new problems, new bottlenecks. I want to keep track of that. The PR size is an example of a metric that lets me understand whether my PRs are growing. We want to have small PRs that are easier to review, safer to get merged. And with GenAI, it's so easy to create more code. I run the risk of having large PRs. So tracking for PR size, and we'll show some more examples, is an example of how I'm tracking and eventually mitigating the risk that accompanies a change in the way we work, such as GenAI.
Yeah, I really like these categories. They're kind of like simple, but but effective, I think, right? I maybe have like a few comments, from what I'm seeing. So I work for Thoughtworks, and we are a global software consultancy. So in the past 6 months in my role, I've seen like a lot of organizations think through, adoption of Gen AI tools. And I would say for the benefits and risks, like in each of those buckets, it's always the balance of speed and quality, right? So for benefits, I see a lot of organizations being very fixated on speed and just looking at speed, right? Like coding time, cycle time, all of those things. And it definitely needs to be balanced with quality indicators, right? Like, for example, developers might actually write more tests with the time that they're saving, which increases the code coverage, but would then also dampen the impact on speed again, right? So it's like the benefit is on both of those things. And the same thing with the risks, right? You might even get slower if developers get more removed from the code because they didn't write it all anymore. So their debugging time might get longer, right? But at the same time, there's of course also risks to quality when you have there's lots been written about the quality risks of coding assistants. And about adoption, I would maybe say one thing to not overdo it, right? Like I've seen one organization really very strongly look at adoption and also with almost like a foregone conclusion about very high expectations from the leadership about the lift that this is going to give in terms of speed. So putting very high expectations on developers to use these tools to become a lot faster and putting a lot of pressure, which then also led to some like gaming of those metrics, for developers to try and fulfill those expectations about the lift they're supposed to get with these tools, right? So, adoption should be really like neutrally monitored, right? Are people actually using it because it's useful and not put on as like an expectation beforehand of how much lift it's going to get them?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. To me, it runs not only on adoption, and obviously, if you stated a goal, everyone should be using this, then you're probably pushing people in the wrong way. But I think at least for new technologies, definitely a revolution like Gen AI, when measuring benefits, it's also important not to have a fixed like this has to be 30% or more for me to be happy.
Yeah.
We're not the industry doesn't know yet what the benefits actually are, how they look at in numbers, how they balance with risks. So I'm definitely advocating to approach this open-ended, measure, and then learn from what you're seeing rather than put a goal. Maybe in a few months' time or a year, we'll have more data. The industry will have more data, and now you can start benchmarking. You can start understanding this is what typical dev orgs of my size, of my industry, of my technology, these are the gains they're getting. Now I can benchmark against what is expected. But for now, I would like learn from the metrics rather than have a set goal for these.
Exactly. Yeah. I agree.
Perfect. So this is our methodology. This has been our theme for the report creation itself, for the survey, for the report itself, as well as through the rest of this workshop. We will be talking about adoption benefits and risks in those categories. Again, one more time, this is going to be recorded and sent out to everybody. If you do have questions, please add them to the chat to everyone. We have people available to answer your questions, and we can always take them offline afterwards if it's something specific to our hosts. And with that, let's get into some actual data. I think that's why we're all here today. So let's go with insight number one of Gen AI adoption state in its current state today, right? So this survey came out not less than a month ago. Yishai, can you walk us through some of the data that we're seeing here so far?
Yes. So going into this research, we already had a good feel for the level of interest, right? We talk with customers, with large companies. Everyone is very interested in that question, in testing out Gen AI and rolling it out, understanding what it can do for me, and in measuring that impact. And the results we got really corroborated that feeling where, it's basically everyone is looking into Gen AI, is planning to invest in it, about 2/3, a little over 2/3 of our respondents are already in the process of evaluating and adopting and rolling out Gen AI. So there's a small percentage that haven't started. They're only just thinking about it. It's about 20%, and about an additional 7.5% that are not currently looking at it, but the vast majority are already in the process. And when you're asking about their plans going forward in 2024, a whopping 87% are planning to invest. So everyone is interested. There's probably a few that are either blocked or currently not on my radar. I'm guessing this is changing soon even for them. So very, very quick adoption and and a lot of interest in this new technology by practically everyone. Birgitta, can you tell me a little about what you're seeing with your customers, the kind of interest they're showing in adopting or evaluating Gen AI?
Yeah, it's probably no surprise that particularly in the last 6 months, I would say, that's also how long I've been, working on this topic, but we've definitely seen a huge lift in number of customers of ours that are using coding assistants in particular. So, and GitHub Copilot is the clear leader of the pack there at the moment as well. And so in 2023, quite a few organizations, also large ones like Mercedes-Benz, for example, is one of our clients, and they've also publicly talked about, starting to roll out Copilot to all of their developers already in July or August or something, I think. And so a lot of organizations have done that. Others are still a little skeptical. I think we'll get to risks and stuff like that later and can talk about that. But we've also been talking to our clients about things beyond coding assistants, right? So what else can you do? Can you use this for, I don't know, architecture tasks, for tests? What can you do in testing? Lots in the coding assistant, but also other things. What can you do for requirements description, right? Story writing, product ideation, all of those things. And in that area, we've seen a lot more kind of holding back and more caution. But I can already feel it's almost the end of January, and I can already feel an effect of probably lots of organizations having action in their plans for 2024, right? So they're now coming to us and now we want to do something, right? We've started with our risk assessments and all of that, and now we observed last year, but now we want to do something. So that's definitely kicking up. And I think it's also a good idea, right? Because there was the last Stack Overflow developer survey. I think it was also the middle of last year, May, June last year. And they also asked developers, are you using AI for your tasks already? And over 40% already in the middle of last year said yes. And I don't think that was all organizationally approved, to be honest. I think people are already today going to ChatGPT the way they usually go to Google and asking it things and using it, right? So it's, you can't really totally prevent it, right? So I think it's a good idea to kind of explore what you can do in a more controlled way in the organization to provide people with the tools because they find them useful.
Yeah, if it's already happening in my dev org, I might as well run a program around it and you know, have a little more control over what people are doing and how they're using that tool, and also measure the impact. And like you said, I think it's rare that a developer organization doesn't have anyone using GenAI today, even if it's not sanctioned or even allowed.
That's right.
Developers will find a way.
Every time. So
Yep.
let's start measuring it, right? All right. So very, very popular. It's being adopted. This is the future. Let's talk about use cases and what is being perceived by different levels of the organization.
Right. So, Birgitta, you began to touch on this with going beyond code generation. So we asked our respondents about what use cases are you looking for? What are you seeing as likely to get value from GenAI? And so we talked about obviously writing new code and writing tests, documentation, code reviews, and so on. And it was interesting to look at how the different respondent looked at this question depending on where they sit in the org chart, right? So we have the C-levels that have one way of looking at things versus the line managers, which have a slightly different priority. If we look at the top graph and we see the different weight, look at code reviews, for example, the purple bar. The C-levels and the directors are putting a pretty low score for that. It's not the top of their priority or the top of what they see as what GenAI can give them, whereas the line managers have a much higher score. If we translate the different numbers into general categories, we see that the executives are focusing on the use cases that are pretty much synonymous for us with productivity and quality, right? More code, more tests. And if I'm putting on an executive hat, eventually I'm about productivity and quality, right? These are the two top level items, or the way I'm thinking about improving as a dev org in a very, very high level. Whereas the line manager, they know, for example, that code reviews are a crucial part of actually getting better, of actually improving productivity and quality. So focusing on things like code reviews and documentation, which are more internal workings, are things that are more in the focus of those managers that are closer to the work. In other words, executives may not care about code reviews, or even know about the role that they play, but the line managers and the people actually with hands-on keyboards have that different view. If we look at the bottom graph, and a word about how to read this is a box plot. So those triangles are the averages, and the bars represent the spread, the most of the spread of the responses. And you can see the differences, or the areas where there's a lot of difference between what managers, directors, and C-levels care about. If we look at dev productivity, you see the very high score that C-levels put to dev productivity, and that is what the expected behavior improvement that they are looking for, compared to managers, which may be a little less bullish about that. Birgitta, you mentioned use cases. What are you seeing? And you also talk about, like, now's the time, everyone is rushing in. What do you see is happening after the core use case of maybe writing code and tests?
Yeah, I mean, apart from that, like I had a few reactions to this, right? Like the developer productivity, definitely, this is something that we're also hearing everywhere, and that can go beyond coding, right? That can go beyond I mean, testing is also kind of coding, right? So using coding assistants to write tests, and maybe also brainstorm about testing scenarios and and stuff like that. And so I think it's like the obvious one that everybody goes to, although productivity, of course, is like a big word, right? But how do you define that, and how do you measure that, right? And again, in my experience at the moment, often when these executives say productivity, they mean speed, right? Like, give me this like 60% faster or cheaper or something like that, right? So, but that's also what we're seeing. I was a bit surprised by the predictable delivery because I actually haven't found the connection yet, like how you can make delivery more predictable when you use these tools. I don't know, Yishai, if you have an idea of what people might have been thinking of. I mean, it's a good goal, right? But I don't see the connection quite yet.
Yeah. So first of all, I think that explains the relatively low scores. Like everyone
Mm,
wants predictable delivery, but the
mm,
way I interpret these numbers is that our respondent believe less in that kind of improvement or that
right.
direction compared to productivity.
Mm,
Um, I think things are intertwined, right? If you
yeah,
are your quality is higher, your delivery eventually is more predictable because
yeah,
delivery is after you've finished all those bugs and you're not putting out fires. So there's a lot of interconnected areas. I think the advanced use cases such as understanding requirements or even summarizing a release can all roll into predictable delivery. But the
yeah,
numbers tell us this is not the core expected improvement
yeah.
that our respondents are looking for or believe that they can get, at least today
Yeah.
from GenAI.
Yeah. And then faster onboarding, I find also very interesting and or in general, knowledge amplification, right? Like actually one of
Yes.
my colleagues in China, he has looked into this a lot and is thinking a lot about how to use certain prompting tools to kind of infuse knowledge that the people who have been around for longer into what the team is doing, right? To really amplify that knowledge. And he always says he would like to call it knowledge engineering, not prompt engineering. So I think there's a lot more there that can be done beyond coding assistance as well. And finally, I would like to make one comment about code reviews because as we're using coding assistants and potentially, we can get higher coding throughput, right? Create more
Yeah.
code per time unit, right? So if we look at our software delivery process, then we have this one part of our process of our system where we're increasing the throughput, right? And if some people are maybe like familiar with systems thinking and stuff like that, right? What will happen if we just increase throughput in one of the parts of our system, right? We'll
Something
get
has to give.
bottlenecks,
Yes.
right? And in a lot of organizations, code review or pull request review is already one of the bottlenecks, right? So what will happen if you create more code, right? So
Yep.
that's like an interesting one. That's also why I like, and we'll see that later, I think that you focus a lot on, looking at metrics around pull requests that will also help you monitor if this is making things worse, right? And pull request sizes and stuff like that. And I mean, at Thoughtworks, we're big fans of pair programming as a tool to improve team collaboration and also team flow, right? And this
Yes.
could actually be like one of the things to also alleviate this bottleneck, to have pairs work with the coding assistant, and then you have the just-in-time review, and you can actually like take some pressure off of the bottleneck of the pull request
So
review. So
almost
that's
like a
one
like
idea.
trio, almost like trio programming or 2.5.
Trio
Uh,
programming, yes, exactly. Because people,
yeah.
of course, ask, "Oh, does this mean?" And GitHub calls Copilot your AI pair programmer, which annoys me a lot, I have to say. But because pair programming is a team practice to make the team better, right? So yeah, but that's why I also like. I think at LinearB you also have this approach of like coming up with ideas how to triage pull requests as well, right? So that would be
Yes.
like another angle to work on the pull request bottleneck. But that will definitely be very interesting to see over time in organizations as they pick up coding assistance, what will happen to that bottleneck.
Yep. I agree. And we're going to talk about this bottleneck in a bit with the risk areas.
That's right. So this has all been about perceived, right, use cases. Now let's go into actual use cases by adoption. This is where things get really, really interesting. What you'll see on both of these graphs is all the way to the left is on that not on my radar kind of feel, and all the way to the right are survey respondents who said we are fully deployed. We have deployed this to our entire organization, and everything in between. You're going to see all these use cases and how they change over time, over that adoption phase. And so we're going to let Yishai kind of talk to us about the more interesting points of these two graphs.
Right. So what we were trying to understand here is how your viewpoint changes as you've actually adopted more and more, as you've rolled out, you've matured in your adoption of the GenAI tools. Let's start with the right-hand graph. And look at those bars. I'm going to contrast the left-hand side. People that have not even started, not on my radar yet. Look at the shape there, with most of the use case importance around code reviews and writing new code is the lowest. And then look at the other end. Look at even the two right-hand groups, which are deployed to parts or fully deployed. And you see that the importance of writing new code is the highest, and code reviews is the lowest. So I interpret this in two ways, and they could both be true at the same time. One is what I feel is important, what is important to me helps drive my adoption. And because writing new code is one of the key promises and the early promises made by this technology. If I cared about that, I'm more apt to actually deploy and roll out. So I'm an early adopter because I care about that use case. And code reviews is coming a bit later. If that is my key objective, maybe I held back. On the flip side, when I adopt, I now learn what is actually possible. So the fully deployed and deployed to parts of your org, the ones that are already playing or working with these tools, are getting their promises. The ability to write new code, to write tests is actually fulfilled in a sense. So they're reinforcing that use case and see how that is important and that is actually working. If we look at the left-hand graph at the bottom, the box plot, we can see, if we look at code quality, you can see that the decrease. Look at the triangles going down as we go from just a trial to fully deployed. That is an example of maybe a use case that is losing luster. As I actually try it out, I actually rolled it out, and maybe it's not as easy to get that benefit or that have that use case work for me. So I'm putting less importance and less weight on that use case. These are my two learnings. And as you can see, dev productivity is high across the board. But again, going a bit down as I'm fully deployed. And I'm wondering, Birgitta, from your customers that are already deploying, what are you seeing as the most successful, success stories or disappointment stories? I wanted this to do this for me, and it's not there yet. I'm not able to get that value.
Yeah, first of all, I would say with the box plot, because for the averages, I have to look at the little arrows, right? I always have to remind myself because I don't read box plots all day, right? But for almost all of them, it kind of goes down, right? And I think that's also a sign. I mean, we're in a hype cycle right now at the peak of inflated expectations, right? And the higher that peak is, the bigger the hangover will be, right? And the more people are going to say quickly, oh, my expectations were so high, they were disappointed, so I'm going to put it aside, right? So I think the key here is to adjust our expectations, because this is definitely going to be useful, in my opinion, and going to be here to stay. And we just have to figure out how to properly use it, right? So that reflects that, I think. And what I find interesting and also see in reality on the right is that the writing new code actually goes up a lot the longer you use it, right? And the more you deploy it, right? And maybe that shows that people are actually surprised by how well it works, because this writing new code is also the thing that I experience myself as the thing that's really impressive, and it's really the thing that probably maybe works the best, or coding assistants are also the most mature of these tools out there. I saw a few people asking in the chat for other tools. I think there's not as many established things out there, right? And then, assisting in code reviews, a lot higher expectations, maybe because so many people have the bottleneck there, right? And then it goes down a lot, and as people actually use it. And I can also confirm that, I haven't seen anything really impressive there yet in that area. So often when I would ask a coding assistant, for example, how can I improve this code or something, it gives me, oh, you can add error handling, very generic kinds of things, almost like a checklist of a newbie code reviewer, So there's definitely still potential. Maybe it also can still get better. I have a lot of questions in my head about technically how it can get better, because it's potentially needs a lot of model requests and a lot of context window. But there's like lots of interesting ideas out there how to also combine large language models with other tools that understand code better, right? So to kind of mitigate some of the weaknesses that they don't actually understand code, right? So I think there's still like potential to improve this, but it might take some time for companies to figure this out.
Yeah, it looks like these use cases are in different places on that hype and disappointment graph. With writing new code probably just about over that hump of it actually works to a degree.
Yeah.
Right.
And in terms of, you were asking me about beyond coding, and I also saw some people asking about, architecture and staff engineers in the chat. What I'm like playing around with at the moment a lot is like prompts, like almost like creative and brainstorming prompts in the architecture area, because I don't think that large language models can be very good in actually helping me take a technical decision, because there's so much context and trade-offs. But they can help me, for example, threat modeling, that the model asks me questions about things I might have forgotten, or I'm trying to come up with prompts that help people write better architecture decision records, and that I can also infuse some of my like architecture governance into. So stuff like that is quite interesting. I think that might not increase the speed in writing decision records, because it's about the journey, not the artifact, almost, right? But might make the quality better, and might give new opportunities for architects for governance, actually.
Yep, I agree. And I'm excited to see what's coming in those areas. A lot of exploration that can happen here.
A lot of opportunity. Let's go into our last two insights. If you're following along, we're about to walk into measuring impact, and then we'll go into risks through that same adoption phase. It's going to be very interesting before our actual product demo, so make sure you stick around. Yishai, we asked this question of how would you like to measure your generative AI code impact? And we broke this down both through the adoption phase as well as the org size. And what pieces of this were the most interesting to you?
So one thing that really stood out to me is if we look at the right-hand graph, the choice to rely on direct measurements to actually get hard data to understand impact grows as we're looking at larger orgs, right? Bigger orgs probably feel more empowered to be able to measure and to go through the effort of collecting and understanding data. And also feel that gives them a good handle on understanding the impact. On the flip side, developer surveys, except for the very small companies where a survey may not even be a useful tool for, if you have 10 developers, you can ask them all, but you can't use any stats. If that goes down, the reliance or the choice to use developer surveys goes down as you look at larger orgs. So that is one interesting point that stood out. Another thing that stands out with the larger organizations is the bump in going for personalized AI impact assessment. And this is basically getting a third party to run a customized, personalized in this sense, assessment. Like have someone, maybe an expert, go in, measure, define what needs to be measured, and give you results that are customized. Obviously, larger organizations with more money, with more process, with more to gain or to lose from not understanding exactly what's going on, are opting for that option. If we look on the left-hand side and look at how the phase of my phase in the journey of adoption, how that impacts the measurement choice, we're also seeing a decrease across the board in reliance on developer surveys. Again, this could hint at when I'm already in it, I understand that surveys are not able to give me the whole picture. Obviously an important tool, but not the whole picture. And also, again, when I'm fully deployed, you see this bump in looking for getting something personalized, something that goes deep. Perhaps something like Birgitta and her team sometimes help create. So these are the things that stand out to me. Birgitta, can you share what are you getting asked around, or how do you help organizations measure this?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I can totally confirm this observation of like the hard versus soft metrics, and that especially maybe larger organizations, they want to go beyond the developer surveys, right? Like even like before Gen AI, a client I worked with, and when we talked about metrics, we sometimes also talked about developer happiness. And one of these executives there really didn't like when I used the word happiness. So we kind of moved to developer experience, developer productivity, those types of words, right? So, the hard measures, I think, is especially if you're further removed from the developers and maybe don't see their daily work and, actually have the connection, then that becomes more important to you, right? But I do think that they're really crucial in this, and maybe especially in the beginning, you do them, and then the further deployed you are, as the data shows, then you've done them, right? So now you focus on the other ones, right? So I think they're really crucial because, there's probably lots of software practitioners in this call, and we all know that measuring this, like measuring delivery performance, is super hard, right? Because we don't have an assembly line with comparable units, and we can just measure throughput, right? So that's why that is so hard. That's why it's important to ask the professionals who use this every day, is this useful to you, right? And also because it has so many effects, like I talked about before. You might increase your code coverage, that again affects the speed. Then the knowledge discovery that is faster through Copilot chat or something like that might make you faster, right? But then there's other things that might make you slower. Again, there's just so many variables, right? So that's why that's important. And then the challenge with the hard measurements is actually that I think some of the things you might not even be able to see because of all of those variables, right? So if you just do like a back of the napkin calculation of, what's the potential of impact of GitHub Copilot or tools like that on your cycle time, right? Like if we wanted to take cycle time as a metric, if you say 40% of cycle time spent on coding, 60% of that can be supported with the assistant because you can't always use it. And then let's say whenever you use the coding assistant, you are actually 55% faster with your task, which is like one of the numbers that GitHub has put out there, right? Then that means that can have like, let's say 10, 12% impact on your cycle time under the best circumstances, because this is a very optimistic scenario, right? Cycle time is a very variable metric. If you have like 8%, 10%, and you maybe wait for a month or 2 months so you have more data, right? You might not even really see it show up, right? So, but that doesn't mean that, it's not worth it and you don't get a return on investment. Like a coding assistant costs less than 0.1% of what your team costs you, right? And, GitHub did not pay me to make this pitch, by the way. I really believe this, right? So it's actually a no-brainer for me, right? Like, and it's just really, really useful. And this, coding assistants will probably go down in history as the most measured tool introduction in history, right? Maybe also because everybody's used to not paying for developer tools, right? And this for once costs money. So
yeah, I think there's like proving ROI or getting that, like you said, the cost today, the price point is low enough that ROI, yes or no, is pretty obvious. But then going further to understand, am I using this to the fullest extent? Am I getting all the benefits that I am hoping for across all the dimensions? And am I not paying in huge setbacks in other places? That's the more mature way to look at this. But I think if it's just a yes or no question, yes, the ROI is there. You don't need to measure that.
Yeah. And I think people should just save the energy thinking too much about the ROI, but look at the other things, because it's a great opportunity to have a look at, how are you measuring your quality today? What are you monitoring, right? Because it doesn't change just because now we're using GenAI in our tool chain, right? How we're measuring doesn't change, really. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is a good segue to talk about the risks and all those things that change. So Necco, you want to take us off?
Let's do it. Yeah, I love that. This is probably my favorite insight of the report itself. Risks perceived versus reality. We look at saying, what are you really worried about? That was kind of the big question. And then the other question is, through the adoption phase, how are your concerns actually changing over time as you adopt more? So let's break down, kind of our security risks and then our risk levels.
Right. So first of all, I think it's not surprising. Security tops the list of concerns for practically everyone. That is also a bucket for a lot of people that covers some of the compliance, intellectual property. But in general, is this going to hurt me directly through security issues? Intellectual property, who owns that code, which I'm now adopting into my code base, is that going to risk or create some exposure from me? Then maybe not surprising, the next batch is code quality, compliance in general. Am I compliant with all my regulations? And at the end, code maintainability. That is a concern that is not resonating a lot with people. It's there, but it's not huge. If we look at the adoption phase, that's where it gets interesting, and you can see that there's a drop pretty much across the board. Maybe security is the only one where the drop is not very felt. As the further on, you are in your journey. This again could play in both ways. If I'm heavily concerned, maybe that's a blocker. I did not move on with my journey. I did not start, or I'm very cautious. And if my concern is low, then I'm free to move on, and my adoption will be quicker. So that's how I interpret the compliance example, where you can see a very low score in the fully deployed. I'm probably saying they are deployed because they care less about compliance. They are less concerned. But you see, security remains high across the board. Maintainability is interesting, and you see that begins as a higher concern and goes down. Here, I think it's fair to interpret that as I now have some experience, and I'm probably not feeling that much of a pain around maintainability. Security and compliance are not things that you feel, oh, this hurt me or not, right? I could run for a year, have huge security risks, but not have proof. With maintainability, there's proof, right? I feel that pain, and if that concern is going down, it probably means that risk is lower in reality than originally perceived. Birgitta, does that match what you're seeing as well?
I mean, for me, code maintainability is also a more long-term thing. I think that's the whole thing with tech debt, and then we don't want to, we just quickly do it, or like certain things we that make our delivery more sustainable. We cut corners in the short term, and then it falls on our feet months later, right? So yeah, it surprises me that goes down, although like I hear this especially from like very experienced developers and organizations that are concerned about this, and about the younger developers or newer developers, just becoming too complacent and just believing everything the coding assistant tells you. And, but I always try to
kind of a kids nowadays kind of.
Yeah, exactly. So
guard.
I always try to be, cautious of this, like, am I the old woman on the veranda, kind of like shaking my fist. Oh, the young people today, right? So, and
where's
then,
my suspenders?
If I'm being honest, like when I think back to when I was less experienced, and even still today, so I've been coding for more than 20 years at this point, and even today, you just go on the internet and you copy and paste things when you don't know yet what to do, and you stitch them together, and you just want to get it to work once, right? So I think in a way we've all been doing this, right? There's just a tool now that can potentially make us even faster at doing that. And like, that might make the problem worse, right? But I also have faith that maybe there's like, we will all adapt to this, right? And we will still put our hands on the hot stove and get burned and then learn from that, right? So those cycles will still be the same. So I'm trying to be not too cynical about it, right? So yeah, but it's not like just because the concerns go down when you're fully deployed, it's not a sign for me yet that it's not a risk. So I'm still like worried about this, but I think it's also a more long-term thing that we'll have to wait for more organizations to use it for longer to learn from this. And the whole like compliance and intellectual property thing, of course, that's like one of the number one things that we also get asked about. I mean, we're not lawyers, we're a software consultancy, right? But yeah, that's definitely the thing that organizations have to get over first in their risk assessment before they roll things out. Yeah.
Right.
Perfect. Well, that is our final insight from the report itself. Our next portion and final portion of the workshop today, show us the goods, right? It's product demos. Anybody here on an R&D team is always excited about product day. We're going to be doing 2 product demos today. One is showing you inside of LinearB, the actual dashboards and how we track the impact of generative AI code within the LinearB platform itself. And then the second demo is going to be showing you how we automatically label PRs that are using generative AI code. Yishai and I were working on these demos right before we went live on those workshops. So these are recorded, but they're recorded like 30 minutes ago. So they're very well
Trust
live.
us, it's real. Yeah.
We're gonna do our best to get this right. Okay. So I'm gonna press play, and Yishai is gonna give us some commentary and kind of set us straight about what's going on.
Great. So what we're looking at here is LinearB UI, and we're looking at a dashboard. It's one of our custom dashboards. LinearB lets you create and customize dashboards with things you care about. I created a custom dashboard, which I call Generative AI Review. And this is a tool that lets me understand both adoption, benefits, and risks for our generative AI usage. When you hit play, and we'll see at the top, we have the filter definition. This is what am I seeing? So I can choose a date range. Let's pause for a second. You can see the filter by. So practically every tool in our space lets you filter data by your teams, by repos. We have a special capability here, which is to look at PR labels. And in this case, we chose to define this dashboard as show me information for the Copilot label in GitHub, in our GitHub repos. And what this does now, all the graphs show me basically 2 lines. The blue lines are all the PRs that are labeled with Copilot, and the gray lines are the baseline, everything else. Now I have this comparative view, and I can start reasoning about the adoption, about the benefits, and about the risks. If we move on, we can start with understanding adoption. So PRs open. Basically, let's look at the count. How many PRs are currently created using that with Copilot assistance versus all the rest? And if that blue line is increasing, that is my adoption is increasing. More and more of our work is getting assisted by Copilot in this case. Same with done branches. It's a different way to measure the work and count the pieces of work that are done with or without the Copilot label. Finally, code changes lets me understand, in this case, actually looking at the volume of changes, how many new code lines am I getting from those labeled PRs versus the baseline. Let's move on. And now we'll scroll to the second line. Let's pause here. And this is where I begin to talk about the benefits. So coding time, perhaps not surprising, that's a natural place to look for benefits. Coding time measures the time it takes a developer to get from the first commit made on a branch all the way until the pull request is ready and created for review. And I expect, or perhaps expect a Copilot assisted pull request to happen faster because I get help writing that code. In this example, you see the blue line shows me a lower on average coding time for the Copilot PRs. So this begins to hint at that benefit that I'm getting. And you can see I can hover over these and see the data points. Obviously, I can also click into these. So drill down into the actual list of pull requests in each of these data points and all the way into GitHub to see the full story of everything that's happened. Moving on, let's look at PR size. This is where things get interesting. So pull request size is a very important metric to understand the batch size that we're working in. We want to have small pull requests that are more easily reviewed and more are safer to merge and deploy. And here we see that our Copilot PRs are much larger, right? On average, they're larger. We know it's easy to create code with Copilot. We run the risk of having bloated PRs that are harder to review and riskier to deploy. So this is something we need to keep tabs on and use these metrics to control that risk, and make sure that we're not paying here for that benefit that we received with coding time. We can also see, let's move on. We can also see review time, which measures the time it takes the team to get a PR reviewed and merged. And if we look at the bottom, time to merge, again, how long it takes from approval of a PR all the way to merge, not a huge difference in behavior here. And let's pause and look at rework. So rework is a measure of how often am I changing code lines which were just committed, right, within the last 21 days. If we committed code and we are quickly changing that, and with a lot of our work is like that, that is a leading indicator of a problem, of quality issues. And what this hints, the spike here with the Copilot rework percentage, is maybe we are committing GenAI assisted or GenAI generated code and quickly needing to replace it and augment it. So that is, again, an indicator. We have to keep tabs on this and understand whether this is a risk or a problem that is creeping up and we need to control it. Maybe we need better reviews of the GenAI PRs and not commit them and then fix them. The next graph, review depth, shows me a difference in behavior. We are providing less comments on those GitHub Copilot PRs compared to the baseline, right? The review depth is lower. Maybe it's a little difficult to review GenAI code. I know it's harder to defend it because I didn't write it. So again, a huge change, maybe a seminal change in how code gets created. It affects our pipeline. It affects our delivery process, like Birgitta, you mentioned. And this is an example. It's not just about the quantities. It's about, how do I even review this? So finally, I'm going to end with our measurement of the PRs that are merged without any review. And in LinearB, because we have Gitstream and automation, we sometimes allow special PRs to go unreviewed and automatically merged. But with Copilot, we made a decision to not allow that. And we're using Gitstream to make sure that if this is a Copilot assisted pull request, we must have a review. So here, again, this graph keeps us honest and helps us make sure that our decision and our policy is actually happening, and we can see this difference in behavior. So this wraps up my first demo of understanding how to use the dashboard in LinearB to understand adoption, understand benefit, and track the risk in adoption of GenAI for our coding practice.
Awesome. Thanks, Yishai. We're going to move on to our automation demo next. For both of these demos, you can do these things in LinearB's free account. You can go to linearb.io, go start your free account today. Onboarding takes 5 minutes, and you can start tracking your generative AI initiative or any other initiative that you have. Create custom labels and track them within your free dashboard. Do it today. It's really cool. So let's get into our next demo that I don't have to pause over and over again. So we're just going to play this.
Before you start, I'll tell, like you said, if you label your PRs, then LinearB will, you automatically have that ability to create those dashboards and compare. This could be about GenAI or any other A/B kind of testing that you'd like to do. Gitstream is our automation engine. In this, it can do a lot of things. I'm going to focus on how we can use Gitstream to automate that labeling process. Because if you are looking to scale and you're looking to measure an initiative across, dozens or hundreds of developers and many repos, you want something a little more than just manually labeling PRs. So I'm going to show with this demo, how we use Gitstream as an automation engine. It lives in your PRs and it can classify them, it can label them, and can do a lot of things with them. In this example, I'm going to show how we do like a human in the middle to get that right label, and then that powers the dashboard that you've seen. So let's hit play. And I'm going to start with the Gitstream documentation page, look at our integrations, and click the GitHub Copilot. I have 3 examples here of how to use Gitstream to get those labels. One, I can label by a set of known users. I know who's using Copilot. I know who has the license, perhaps one team. I can use that to label. The other, I can look for a tag, for a hint in the pull request title, description, comments, whatever. And the third, which I'm going to demo today, is using a prompt. So Gitstream will automatically create a prompt and use the response to label the PR. In this page, like any other documentation, we have the actual rule files for Gitstream to affect this automation or this flow. And I'm going to use Gitstream's playground, which is like a place to test and try out things. I've pasted this code in the playground. And as you can see, this is a simple YAML rule file, which performs two automations. One is to create the comment, the prompt, and the second is to parse the prompt and label the PR. To test this, I created a test pull request in our Gitstream repo with an amazing one-liner change to our documentation. Let's pretend that this is a Copilot helped me create this change. I'm going to grab the PR URL, put it in our playground, and ask Gitstream to process. Now Gitstream is fetching the information for that pull request, running through the automation rules and deciding what to do. In real life, this runs as like a GitHub action inside my pull request. Here in the playground, it runs on the side. As you can see, Gitstream decided to create a comment. This is the prompt. I'm going to simulate this by copying that comment and putting it inside myself. So I'm creating the comment. Again, this would be automatic with Gitstream. And I'm going to hit that Copilot assisted. This is the human in the middle where the developer is saying, yes, I got some help. Now Gitstream, I'll ask it to process again. I'm going to run Gitstream on this PR again. Now it's going to find that comment, find the checkbox, and use that information to label the PR. You see at the bottom here of the output, now there is a decision to label the PR. All I have to do is roll this rule file in my repo or in a central repo to control all of my repos. Now people will get prompts, and according to their responses, those labels will be automatically added, powering a dashboard like you've just seen in the previous demo.
And because I've been in the GenAI tunnel for so long, I at first thought by prompt you were calling an LLM, but here you of course mean a prompt for the user of the PR, right? Not a large language model, right?
That's right. That's right. This is a human prompt. And as I said, in Gitstream, it's like a flexible automation engine. You could use it in many ways. This is an example of using that power to prompt a human, wait for the response, use that response to make a decision, label, obviously do things like automatically merge or approve PRs, a slew of options. Here I'm focusing on labeling to power that dashboard that we've seen before.
Awesome. Wow. Gitstream is also free to use. Let me put that marketer hat back on and let you know, with the free account, you can automatically label your PRs. You can track those labels and understand the impact starting today. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have demos available if you want a handhold walkthrough of understanding the LinearB platform and all of its other capabilities, from resource allocation, cost capitalization, automation, and developer productivity. We have a slew of features available to you. And then also huge thanks to Birgitta at Thoughtworks. If you're ready to start your AI journey today and you don't know where to begin, Birgitta is happy to help you. Her email is there. We will be sending this deck out along with the recording. Thank you all for joining us today. It's been really wonderful. Reach out to us at LinearB if you have any direct questions about anything you've seen here today. And with that, we will let you get on with your week. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.